Good evening, sir. Shall we start the program? Respected speakers, sir, and our esteemed participants, I, Dr. Jyoti Das from Department of Sociology, Cotton University, extend my warm welcome to all of you to our 17th session of this 100-hour lecture series. Over to you, sir.
Thank you. In the last session, we did discuss about consciousness along with the fundamental limitations of modern psychology and 4 elements of man's being. So now we are discussing consciousness, and we shall be discussing about consciousness for next 2-3 sessions. And we shall be taking up number of quotations from Sri Aurobindo's writing regarding consciousness. And last session, we did discuss about consciousness as a fundamental thing, consciousness as a fundamental thing. So it is fundamental, it is indispensable, it is fundamental thing. So let us first recap, and then we shall move on to new aspect of consciousness. So first, the consciousness is a fundamental thing we did discuss, and fundamental thing in the existence. So consciousness is a fundamental thing, at a maulik tattva, and consciousness, maulik tattva mane, it does not depend on anybody. আমি সেই বিষয়ে পৰৱৰ্তী সময়ত আকৌ যেতিয়া আমি আন এসপেক্ট কনসিয়াসনেছৰ আলোচনা কৰিম আমি তেতিয়া বুজিব পাৰিম। সেইভাবে এতিয়া আমি বুজিব লাগিব ফান্ডামেন্টাল মানে কি। গতিকে কনসিয়াসনেছ ইজ এ ফান্ডামেন্টাল থিং, ইট ডাজ নট ডিপেন্ড অন এনিবডি, ইট ইজ ফান্ডামেন্টাল থিং and fundamental in existence. So consciousness is the fundamental thing in existence according to Sri Aurobindo. Then we did mention consciousness is the energy. Consciousness is energy. Consciousness is the motion, goti, bhakti, goti, force. Consciousness is the energy. Consciousness is the motion. Consciousness is also the movement of consciousness. It is motion as well as the very movement of the consciousness is also consciousness. So consciousness is a fundamental thing. Consciousness is the fundamental thing in existence. Consciousness is energy. Consciousness is motion. Consciousness is the movement in consciousness. What they do? They means this energy, this motion, this movement, what they do? Creating the universe. With these things, consciousness creates the universe. Creates the universe. So universe is nothing but the manifestation of consciousness only. Because consciousness is the fundamental thing. There is no other substance in this world. According to Indian psychology, Indian spirituality. We are discussing through the lens of Sri Aurobindo only. So, and according to Indian psychology, Indian spirituality, consciousness is the fundamental thing. Consciousness is the energy, consciousness is the motion, consciousness is the movement of consciousness. And what it does create the universe. It does create the universe. Not only universe, all that is in universe. All that is in universe. Whether subjective, whether objective. Whether poetry, whether river. Whether a motor car, whether a house, or whether democracy. Anything. Everything is the manifestation of consciousness. Consciousness is the fundamental thing in existence. Without consciousness, this existence will be non-existent. Consciousness is the fundamental thing. So consciousness creating not only universe, it is also creating all that is in it. So it can be interpreted, or it can be understood with two words. One is called macrocosm and other one is called microcosm. So the whole universe is macrocosm, Brahmanda. Who is creating this Brahman? Who is creating this Brahmanda? It is the consciousness. Consciousness is creating this Brahmanda, this macrocosm. And what is microcosm? We are microcosm, Kudra Jagat. We all are one of the universe, but in a microcosm. So this is another concept. In Indian spirituality, in Indian psychology, we are not separated from the world. Rather, we are just the smaller version of the universe. What is in universe? Everything is within us too. We are not separated from the world. যেনেকে উপনদী গৈ নদীত পৰে, নদী গৈ সাগৰত পৰে, সাগৰৰ জানো বাউণ্ডেৰী আছে? There is no boundary. ভাৰতবৰ্ষৰ ঋষিয়ে যেতিয়া বসুধৈৱ কুটুম্বকম বুলি কৈছে, এইটো বৌদ্ধিক চালাকি নহয়. It is a truth of existence. This is truth. This is not ideal. It is a truth. So there is a difference between ideal and truth. So Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam is not ideal. It is not morality. It is not ethics. It is not idealism. But it is a truth of existence. It is a truth of existence. So we are microcosm. We are Kudra Jagat and macrocosm in the whole universe. Consciousness creating both macrocosm as well as microcosm. So then we are clear, consciousness is the fundamental thing in existence. What is consciousness? Consciousness is energy. Consciousness is motion. Consciousness is the movement of consciousness. And what it does create universe. Not only universe, but all that is in it. A universe or bhitorot jiei ase. Everything is being created by consciousness. And so it can be understood with two words, macrocosm and microcosm. So macrocosm is the whole Brahmanda, and microcosm, we are Kudra Brahmanda, we are Kudra Jagat. We are not separated from the world. Then the process, how consciousness works, how consciousness is being worked out, how this material object is being worked out, how consciousness works, how consciousness creates. Consciousness, when consciousness forgets itself, যেতিয়া চেতনা আত্মবিস্মৃত হৈ যায়. কেনেকে আত্মবিস্মৃত হয় সেইবিলাক ফাৰ্দাৰ ষ্টাডি আমি ইমান আলোচনা নকৰো. এটা থুলমূল I am trying to give a rough idea only, and that is why we will be taking up different aspect of consciousness in order to have a comprehensive conception of consciousness, because consciousness is a thing to be experienced, not so much to be understood intellectually. But we are trying to grasp the idea intellectually, though it is not possible entirely. So when consciousness forgets itself, যেতিয়া চেতনা আত্মবিস্মৃত হয়, কেনেকে আত্মবিস্মৃত হয় মই পৰৱৰ্তী অৱস্থাত লাহে লাহে আৰু অলপমান যেতিয়া আমি আলোচনা কৰিম আমি কৈ থাকিব পাৰিম. Which is it itself in the action or form. হয় ৰূপৰ মাজত আত্মবিস্মৃত হৈ যায়, যিকোনো ৰূপৰ মাজত, গণতন্ত্ৰ, মানুহ, পশু, নদী, পৰ্বত বা মেটাৰ, কিবা এটা ৰূপৰ মাজত কনচিয়াছনেছ আত্মবিস্মৃত হৈ যায়, আৰু নহলে এটা একশ্যনৰ মাজত. এটা অ্যাকশন। আৰু কেতিয়া কোন সময়ত forget itself in the action or form? At what time? Because when it is in the movement. So the condition is when consciousness is in the movement, যেতিয়া সি গতিশীল হৈ আছে চেতনা, যেতিয়া consciousness inert হৈ থাকে, তেতিয়া it does not forget itself in action because at that time consciousness is inert. So when consciousness is in movement, or rather under stress of movement, which is rather a certain stress of movement. Consciousness is under certain stress of movement, or it is in the movement. Gotit jetia ase, gotikil hoi ase, not tamoshik hoi thaka nai, inert nohoy. Jetia ki hoy, it forgets itself in action and in form. Then what it becomes? When consciousness forgets itself in action, when it is in movement, then what happens? Then consciousness becomes apparently unconscious energy. When it forgets itself in the action, it becomes apparently unconscious energy. So thus consciousness is being transformed into energy. Forgetting and becoming energy. But the condition is when consciousness is in its movement, or rather under stress of movement. And when it forgets itself in the form, then what it becomes? Then it becomes atom, then it becomes electron, then it becomes material object. Because we know, science says object is composed of this electron and atom. So when consciousness forgets in form, যেতিয়া ৰূপৰ মাজত আত্মবিস্মৃত হৈ যায়, তেতিয়া হি material objectলৈ ৰূপান্তৰিত হয়। আৰু যেতিয়া কৰ্ম অৰ্থাৎ ক্ৰিয়াৰ মাজত, কৰ্ম বুলি ক'লে ঠিক ভুল হ'ব, ক্ৰিয়া, কিবা এটা ক্ৰিয়াৰ মাজত আত্মবিস্মৃত হৈছে, তেতিয়া শক্তিলৈ ৰূপান্তৰিত হয়। সেইবাবে কৈছে consciousness is also energy, consciousness is also motion. Then it becomes atom, then it becomes electron, then it becomes material object. Though it is forgetting itself in form, or though it is forgetting itself in the action under stress of movement or in its movement, still it is consciousness. You cannot say that this particular consciousness has become material object, so now there is no consciousness in the material, in the form. So it is still consciousness, but at the same time it has become material object also. So it is still consciousness. So still it is consciousness working in the energy. Though it has become energy, but still it is consciousness. Now it is consciousness as well as it is energy. Now it is form as well as consciousness. Consciousness is still in the form. Though consciousness has itself become form, still it is consciousness. So in the energy, what is there in the energy? Consciousness is there in the energy. What is there in the form? Consciousness is there in the form. And this process is called involution. It is the process of descent of consciousness into form, into material. The process of descent of consciousness into form, what is called involution, opposite of evolution. The opposite process of evolution, it is called involution. As now consciousness is involved in the matter, consciousness wants to liberate itself. Consciousness wants to liberate itself. Nijoke mukto koribo bisare chetonar pora. But still it will dare in the matter. So it will, janeka cinema double acting thake double acting koribo. Ikhesh nohoy. Gotike etia jitu সংবৃত হৈ আছে সেইটোহে বিবৃত হ'ব পাৰিব সংবৃত involved, which is being involved, that can only evolve. So consciousness is involved in the matter. So original fundamental thing is energy and matter. So consciousness is in energy, consciousness is in matter. Again, energy is also consciousness. Consciousness is in energy. On the other hand, energy is also a consciousness. So now it wants to liberate itself, but still in the form. So it will remain in the form, but still it wants to liberate itself from the form. So when it wants to liberate itself, but still in the form, it emerges as life. So after matter, what we saw, what evolved in this universe, we all know from book, though we are not personally, we were not personally witnessing, because আমার জন্মৰ পৰাই আমি গছও দেখিছো, আমি মেটাৰো দেখিছো, সব দেখিছো, কিন্তু আমাক বিজ্ঞানে কৈছে, আমি মানি লৈছো যে মেটাৰৰ পিছত উদ্ভিদ জগত আবিৰ্ভাৱ হৈছিল পৃথিৱীত. So Udbid Jagat means life. Life. And life is a veiled consciousness only. Nothing but it is a veiled consciousness. Prasanna hoi taka jivan pran shakti is nothing but a veiled consciousness only. And after that, after Udbid, after plant world, came the animal world. Animal is higher manifestation of life. Rather full manifestation of life plus vibration. Jibon tar lage lage spondon. Jibonor lage lage spondon. So greater evolution of consciousness. Greater and greater evolution of consciousness. Then after animal world, man appeared in this world, in this existence. So when it wants to liberate itself, but still in the form, it emerges as life, as animal, as man. And it can go on evolving itself like this. So it can go on evolving itself still further out of its involution. So there is infinite consciousness involved in the matter. It will go on evolving itself, but still it will remain there, and will become something more than mere man, as the all subsequent evolution is the greater thing, because life was greater than matter, animal was so plant was greater than material matter, animal was greater than plant, and man was greater than animal. So now the involved consciousness will manifest itself in something greater than mind and man. This is the destiny of world. So destiny of this universe, destiny of this world, destiny of life. This is the ultimate destiny of world. So evolution is the destiny. Evolution of something greater than mind, and it will go on evolving, because consciousness is also infinite. So we did discuss this thing yesterday. We have just recapped. Consciousness being the fundamental thing in existence. Also, we did discuss something, the process of descent and ascent, or you may call process of involution and the process of evolution. Two movements. One involution first, second is evolution. So now let us discuss consciousness then. Normally, what we know about consciousness, what is our ordinary perception about consciousness? Consciousness is awareness. Simply speaking, very simply speaking, consciousness is awareness. So another dimension now. So from till yesterday, we discussed consciousness as energy, as motion, as the movement of consciousness, as the fundamental thing in universe, creating this universe and all that is in universe, consciousness forgetting itself in the form, consciousness forgetting itself in action, becoming energy, becoming form, still in the form, still in the action, even after becoming energy, even after becoming form. Now it wants to liberate itself. So then another dimension, another aspect of consciousness. Consciousness as awareness. Is awareness not a power? Because animal does not have this awareness. We are powerful than animal. Why? Because we possess consciousness. Then what is consciousness? Consciousness is a power of awareness. Because awareness is not a very simple thing. Awareness is a power. And this power is not, I am being not empowered by law, not constitution, not by political authority. This awareness is mine. So this is a power. So consciousness is power of awareness. But awareness of what? Awareness of self and things. So consciousness is awareness of the self. Self means own. Moi nijor bikoye sachetonota. And of the jagat and of the things. But Sri Aurobindo says consciousness is not only power of awareness of self and things. It is something greater even than. Greater even that also. It is power of awareness, undoubtedly. Consciousness, awareness, not simple awareness. Consciousness is power of awareness. Power of awareness of what? Power of awareness of self and things. Nijor bikoy, bostur bikoy. Awareness.
গতিকে কাইলৈ আকৌ 9টাতে গৈ বহিব লাগিব, কাইলৈ লাষ্ট ডেট।
But consciousness is not only power of awareness of self and things. Then what it is? Sri Aurobindo in single sentences, it is or has also a dynamic and creative energy. The sentence is one. It is or has also a dynamic and creative energy. So consciousness is a dynamic and creative energy. You can interpret. Consciousness is not. In last definition, we understood consciousness forgetting itself and becoming energy. But what type of energy? It is a creative energy. It creates. It is not ordinary energy. So consciousness is a creative energy and also dynamic energy, not a static energy. When you are becoming conscious of something, you become dynamic. And that dynamism creates everything. That dynamism creates poetry. That dynamism is creating human civilization. That dynamism is creating the whole universe. So consciousness is not only power of awareness, it is energy. It is not only ordinary energy, it's a dynamic and creative energy. Or you can interpret this thing in other way only, other way also. What is that other way? You may say dynamism and creative energy is within consciousness. And that is why Maharishi writes, it is means consciousness is or consciousness has. So dynamic and creative energy, গতিশীল সক্রিয় শক্তি, সৃজনশীল শক্তি মানেই হল কনচিয়াছনেছ। আমি এনেকেও ক'ব পাৰো, নহলে এনেকেও ক'ব পাৰো চেতনাৰ মাজত কি আছে? সক্ৰিয় শক্তি আৰু সৃজনশীল শক্তি। দুই ধৰণেই ক'ব পাৰো। It is or has. Consciousness is dynamic and creative energy, or consciousness has dynamic or creative energy. So then Maharishi says it can determine its own reaction and abstain from reaction. Because consciousness is a power. It can react or it can abstain from reacting. When consciousness does not react, you cannot say it is devoid of consciousness. যেতিয়া চেতনাই প্ৰতিক্ৰিয়া প্ৰকাশ নকৰিব পাৰে, it may not react, but that does not mean আজি এটা মেটাৰে ৰিয়েক্ট নকৰে। Matter does not react. Because consciousness in matter is not dynamic energy. It is involved. But for that matter, you cannot say there is no consciousness in the matter. That is why Maharishi writes, it can determine its own reaction. Because it is a power. It does not depend on anybody. Consciousness will determine its own reaction and abstain from reaction. Abstain from reaction. মণি শৰ্মা আপুনি হেৰিটো বন্ধ কৰি ল'ব। মণি শৰ্মা আপুনি হেৰিটো বন্ধ কৰি ল'ব। মিউট কৰি ল'ব, মিউট কৰি ল'ব, মিউট কৰি লওক আপুনি। মণি শৰ্মা মিউট কৰি ল'ব।
সোমোৱা নাই নহয়, নাজানো।
মণি শৰ্মা, হেল্ল', মণি শৰ্মা আপুনি মাইক্ৰফোনটো মিউট কৰি লওক। আপুনি মাইক্ৰফোনটো মিউট কৰি ল'ব। So it can not only answer to forces but create and put out from itself, put out from forces itself. Forces mean forces of the nature. Consciousness is seed but also seed shakti. আমি যে সচ্চিদানন্দ বুলি কওঁ, the Sachidananda, the word Sachidananda, Mani Sharma, hello, Mani Sharma apni microphone to mute kori labo. Mani Sharma apni microphone to mute kori labo.
Tell the controller to mute them.
Mani Sharma,
I request the controller to mute the mic of the receiver.
Mani Sharma apni etu mute kori labo. It can not only answer to forces, but create and put out from forces. Because consciousness is the energy, consciousness is the power of awareness. Consciousness can determine its own reaction. Consciousness is not only seed, but also seed shakti. This is the fundamental addition to the age-old conception of Sachidananda by Sri Aurobindo. Popularly, the consciousness is defined as Sat, Seed, Ananda. Sat means existence. This is existence. It is a triune. It is a three element. Sat means existence. Seed means consciousness. And Ananda means Ananda bliss. But Maharishi says it is not only ordinary seed, because consciousness is dynamic energy, consciousness is a force. So Maharishi says it is not only seed, so
May I request Mani Sharma to be removed from the
this
group?
is new element added to the seed. New element. So let me call to Mani Sharma to mute his
May I request the organizers to kindly mute Moni Verma? Mr. Mridul, who's looking after the IT.
To engage with us. Let us proceed. So consciousness is not only power of awareness. So main thing, fundamental thing is consciousness is dynamic and creative energy. Consciousness is dynamic and creative energy, or you can say dynamism and creativity is in the consciousness itself. So it is or has also a dynamic and creative energy. And that is why Maharishi says, see, it is not only consciousness. See, it is consciousness plus force. Sit Shakti. See, it is not only sit, it is also sit Shakti. So consciousness, not only power of awareness of self and things, point to be noted, number one. Number two, it is a dynamic and creative energy, or you may say it is a dynamic and creative energy as well. It can determine its own reaction. It can abstain from reaction as well. It can answer to forces of the nature. Consciousness can react, but it is not dependent on the force that consciousness has to react. So it can answer to forces. It can create or put out from itself, put out from forces itself as well. So consciousness, because consciousness is seed, but it is seed Shakti as well. It is also Shakti. It is seed, it is also Shakti. Now, but in ordinary terms, consciousness is identified with mind only. In ordinary parlance, or in ordinarily, we understand consciousness as mind. So for ordinary, for laymen, for us, mind is our consciousness. Definitely mind is a consciousness. But mind is not the only aspect of consciousness. So consciousness is usually identified with mind. But then Maharishi says mental consciousness is only the human range. As I have been repeatedly saying, there are 5 ranges of consciousness. We shall be taking up one after another. Let us first discuss the consciousness first. But mental consciousness is only the human range. Only the human range. আমি আগতো আলোচনা কৰিছিলো এইটো যে which no more exhaust all the possible ranges of consciousness. যেনেকে আমাক দুটা ইয়াত মেটাফৰিকেলি কৈছিলে মহাৰিষি, যেনেকে মানুহে যিটো আমি শুনো শব্দ কানেৰে, যিটো আমি শব্দ মানুহে শুনে, মানুহে শুনাটোৱেই সাউণ্ডৰ সকলো ৰেঞ্জ, সকলো ভূমি এক্সজষ্ট নকৰে। জগতত আৰু কৰবাত শব্দ উৎপত্তি সাউণ্ড হয়তো আছে, আমি শুনা নাপাওঁ, মানুহৰ আমি কানেৰে শুনা নাপাওঁ। আমি শুনা নাপাওঁ মানে আমি সাউণ্ড নাই বুলি ক'ব নোৱাৰো। ঠিক যেনে ধৰণে কালাৰ, আমি যিমান কিটা কালাৰ চকুৰে, বাহ্য চকুৰে দেখা পাইছো, কেৱল সেইকিটাই পৃথিৱীত কালাৰ আছে, নট দ্যাট। কৈছে ইয়াত, কৈছে which the consciousness is usually identified with mind, but mental consciousness is only the human range. Only the human range. বুজিব লাগিব হিউম্যান ৰেঞ্জ মানে তেতিয়াহ'লে কি কৈছে, বেলেগ কোট ৰেঞ্জত বেলেগ কোনে আৰু কনসিয়াসনেস আছে, which no more exhaust all the possible ranges of consciousness. So there are non-human ranges of consciousness also, to which mind does not have any access. So which no more exhaust all the possible ranges of consciousness than human sight, exhaust all the gradations of color. আমি চকুৰে যিটো দেখা পাইছো কালাৰ, সেইটোৱেই কালাৰৰ যিমান ৰেঞ্জ আছে সকলো নিশেষ কৰা নাই, সকলো শেষ কৰিব পৰা নাই. There are ranges of color beyond human sight or human hearing, all the gradations of sound. Because the hearing is only, this is only human range. This sight is only human sight. There is below, there is above. For there is much above or below, that is to man invisible and inaudible. Manuhor babe inaudible or invisible, there are ranges of color, there are ranges of sound. ঠিক তেনেকে there are ranges of consciousness. আমি সেই কথাটোই প্ৰতিপাদন কৰাৰ বাবে এই কনসিয়াসনেছৰ কোডটো আমি লৈছো, কাৰণ পৰৱৰ্তী সময়ত যেতিয়া আমি কনসিয়াসনেছৰ 5টা ৰেঞ্জ আমি আলোচনা কৰিম, কাৰণ সেই 5টা ৰেঞ্জ আলোচনা নকৰালৈকে আমি ইণ্ডিয়ান সাইকোলজি we cannot proceed. Merely ফ্ৰয়েডৰ দৰে অকল আনকনসিয়াস কনসিয়াসনেছ বা জুঙৰ দৰে অকল কালেক্টিভ কনসিয়াসনেছ আৰু ইন্ডিভিজুৱেল কনসিয়াসনেছ যদিও তেওঁলোকে কিছু ভিতৰলৈ গৈছে, but only to that extent only. So there are ranges of consciousness above and below the human range. Above and below the human range, with which the normal human has no contact. But with yogic consciousness, you can contact with those ranges. But the laboratory of yogic consciousness laboratory of yogic consciousness varies from individual to individual. So your laboratory of consciousness may not be applicable for me. We must have our individual laboratory of consciousness, laboratory of yogic consciousness, through which we have to start our adventure of consciousness. So with which the normal human has no contact, and they seem to eat unconscious. আমরা সেই কারণে আমি হয়তো ভাবো যে they are তাত কোনো consciousness নাই, unconscious, because we don't have any contact with them. And what are those ranges? Supramental, overmental, submental ranges. So there are ranges below mind, there are ranges above mind. What are below? There are vital consciousness, pranic cetona ase, sharirik cetona ase. They are below submental. And as a whole mind or below, there is subconscious. Even in the surface consciousness, there is mental mind, there is physical mind, there is vital mind. All these parts will be taken up. But here, as a fundamental, we just have to recognize that there are different ranges of consciousness, and within one ranges there are several sub-ranges also. So point to be noted that consciousness usually identified with mind, usually identified with mind. But mental consciousness is only a human range. The second point to be noted. And the third point, there are other possible ranges of consciousness. As I have been repeatedly saying, superconscious, subliminal, subconscious, inner conscious, and the surface consciousness which we possess. There are 5 ranges. So as there are other gradations of sound beyond human hearing, as there are other gradations of color beyond human sight, so there are other ranges of consciousness beyond mental consciousness. So there are ranges of consciousness above and below human range. That is to say, supramental or overmental, even submental. And the normal human has no contact with them. Normal human has no contact with them. They seem to eat unconscious. They seem to eat unconscious. But subconscious is very much conscious. Inconscious is very much conscious. Subliminal is very much conscious. There is a subliminal mind within me. There is a subliminal vital within me. There is a subtle body within me. Those are more conscious than that of surface mind, than that of surface vital, than that of surface physical. So conscious, so psychology is nothing but science of self-knowledge and science of consciousness as well as science of self-knowledge. I have to know myself first. But the irony is we know sociology, we know politics, we know economics, we know chemistry, we know physics, we know mathematics, we know rocket science. We know many things about sun and moon and Mars and all the universe, but we do not know about ourselves. This is the irony of humanity. And we do not care to know about ourselves. As animal does not want to know, as animal does not want to conscious about themselves, so we also do not want to be conscious of our higher possibilities. And in that context, Freud was absolutely right that human being is only all our motivation is being driven by urge for sexuality, because this is the basic fundamental teaching of Freud. So Freud is correct. Freud was correct. So far as our animal humanity is concerned. It is not that Freud was not correct. Freud was correct, very much correct. কিন্তু ফ্ৰয়ডৰ লগত সমস্যাটো আছিল কি, ফ্ৰয়ডে মানুহৰ হায়াৰ সম্ভাৱনাৰ বিষয়ে তেওঁ হয়তো ধাৰণা কৰিব নোৱাৰিব, যেটো মই আগত মহাৰিষীৰ উত্তৰটো কৈছো। মহাৰিষীয়ে কৈছে ইয়েছ, যিবিলাক ফিজিঅলজিকেল সাইকোলজি দে আৰ কাৰেক্ট, কাৰণ তেওঁলোকে মানুহক যিটো আমাৰ পশুধৰ্মী মানুহ যিটো পশুৰ লগত to that extent, যিটো যিমান এক্সটেণ্টলৈকে পশুৰ লগত we are similar, কিন্তু তাৰ বাহিৰেও যে হিউমেনিটিৰ মাজত there are other possibilities, আৰু সেইবাবেই মানুহৰ সমাজত আমাৰ যে শিক্ষা, আমাৰ spirituality, মনস্তত্ব, our culture, what are these? These are nothing but instruments to conscious ourselves. জগতত দুটা জ্ঞানেই প্ৰয়োজন আছে, knowledge about world, knowledge about self, and knowledge about the ultimate reality. This is the subject matter of knowledge. But at present, humanity's quest for knowledge is one-sided. It is only concerned about world knowledge, without regard to self-knowledge and ultimate reality of the ultimate truth of the reality. So it is there, and that is why it is one-sided knowledge. This tree has to be integrated: self-knowledge, world knowledge, even chemistry, physics, mathematics, economics, political science, anthropology, sociology has to be integrated with self-knowledge. Without self-knowledge, what is the meaning of studying sociology? What is the meaning of studying economics, political science, mathematics? I have to know myself first. What is my own? What is my highest destiny, highest possibility? That is what is called psychology, self-knowledge, knowledge about my own possibility, highest possibility. I am not only animal being, I am also a mental being. I am something greater than mind also. I can ascend to something greater than mind. I can be a Vijnanamoya Satta. I can be Anandamoya Satta, beyond Manomoya Satta. So now let us take up another aspect of consciousness. Another aspect of consciousness that consciousness is a reality. Consciousness is not an ideal or symptom. Consciousness is a reality. As we were discussing consciousness as a fundamental thing, now Maharishi says consciousness is a reality inherent in existence. Consciousness is a reality inherent in existence. Inherent in existence. It is there even when it is not active. Consciousness may not remain active. And for that account, you cannot say there is no consciousness in this particular stone. It may remain inactive, but still it is there. Because consciousness is a reality inherent in existence. So consciousness is a reality inherent in existence. It is there even when it is not active on the surface, but silent and immobile. এজন তামসিক মানুহ, জড় মানুহ, একেবাৰে জড় মানুহ, ইনাৰ্ড হৈ পেলাই আমি জড়ভূত বুলি যে কওঁ, তাৰ অৰ্থ কি তেওঁৰ মাজত চেতনা পুঞ্জীভূত হৈ থকা নাই নেকি? It may not be active. It may be inactive. It may be immobile. But still consciousness is there in him. It may not be active because consciousness is a reality inherent in existence. Nothing can exist without consciousness, because consciousness is the fundamental thing in existence. It is there even when it is invisible on the surface. Consciousness may not be visible, consciousness may be inactive, consciousness may be immobile, consciousness may not be active. Still consciousness is there in existence because it is a reality inherent in existence. So not reacting on outward things or sensible to them. I am not reacting. I am still, I am immobile like a yogi. So it will be explained further. So it contradicts a fundamental yogic experience. If we say when consciousness is inactive, if we say there is no consciousness in it, then it will contradict one fundamental living yogic experience. Because yogis when yogis are still, you cannot say that yogi is without consciousness. Rather, he is full of consciousness spread out. So, not reacting on outward things or sensible to them, but withdrawn and either active or inactive within. It may be inactive. It is there even when it seems to us to be quite absent. আমি সেইকাৰণে ভাৰতবৰ্ষত এটা আমি মেটেৰিয়েলি, লজিকেলি, ৰেচনেলি আমি যে ভগৱানৰ মূৰ্তি আমি ঘৰত ৰাখো, it is a material, it is a matter. Still we keep it. Why? Because consciousness is there in the idol. It may not be visible, it may be immobile, it is inactive. আমি ধৰ্মগ্ৰন্থবোৰ যেতিয়া বহুতে কেতিয়াবা আপোনালোকেও হয়তো কাৰোবাক ক্ৰিটিচাইজ কৰিছে যে আমি কেতিয়াবা ধৰক কোনোবা এজন মানুহ ধৰক অশিক্ষিত মানুহ কিন্তু তেওঁ আনক দেখুৱাবৰ কাৰণে কিতাপ কিনিছে, ধৰ্মগ্ৰন্থ কিনিছে, ধুনীয়াকে ড্ৰয়িং ৰুমত নিট এণ্ড কিন্তু কণ্ডিশ্যন নিট এণ্ড ক্লিন ধুনীয়াকে আলমাৰিত ৰাখি থৈছে. Still he is getting benefit. Maybe very slight portion, maybe very minuscule, একেবাৰে অলপমান হ'ব পাৰে, because consciousness is there in the book also. Everything, because consciousness is a reality inherent in existence. Everywhere consciousness is there, because sarvam khalvidam brahman, all is brahman. So it is there even when it seems to us to be quite absent. The ঘৰত মই ধৰ্মগ্ৰন্থ এখন যদি নপঢ়ো, মই ঘৰত যদি ধুনীয়াকে তাক যদি ৰাখি থৈছো, still it vibrates. পৰিমাণ বেলেগ বেলেগ পাৰে হ'ব. So it is there even when it seems to us to be quite absent, and being unconscious and inanimate. When we observe a being unconscious, apparently unconscious and inanimate, to our view, that being is unconscious and inanimate to our view, still consciousness is there in that being, because consciousness is a reality within. And another one thing, these things cannot be proved empirically. যদি ভবিষ্যতে কেতিয়াবা কিবা ওলাই মই নাজানো, because all these are subjective existence, subjective truth. It has to be experienced individually. So right now, either we have to accept this or we may reject this. But it cannot be proved like that water is, this portion is oxygen, this portion is hydrogen. It has to be experienced. So a reality, consciousness is a reality inherent in existence, even when not active, but silent and immobile. Still consciousness is there in that matter or being, even when not visible, not reacting or sensible, but withdrawn and either active or inactive within. It may be active within or may not be active even within. Even when it seems to be quite absent and the being unconscious and inanimate, যেটা আমি মানুহটোৰ মাজত কোনো ইনএনিমেট জীৱন্ত নহয় যেন লাগে, তাত অচেতন, still they are in that being, because consciousness is a reality inherent in existence. So let me recap. So basically we did discuss 4 aspects of consciousness today. First one is consciousness is the fundamental thing. Consciousness is a fundamental thing. Consciousness is a reality inherent in existence. Consciousness is not only power of awareness, it is something more. And what is that more? It is or has dynamic and creative energy. And that is why sit is not only sit, it is sit plus Shakti. It is consciousness plus force. Sachidananda is not devoid of Shakti. So consciousness, আমি সচ্চিদানন্দ বুলি ক'বলৈ গ'লে সৎ প্লাস চিত শক্তি প্লাস আনন্দ, existence, consciousness dash force plus bliss, sat sit ananda sachidananda. The highest reality is depicted in India as the Sachidananda. And then we did discuss consciousness usually identified with mind. Consciousness is usually identified with mind, but there are ranges above mind, there are ranges below mind. যেনেকে কৈছে যে আমাক এটা ধুনীয়া যি ধৰণে আমি যিটো শব্দ আমি কাণেৰে শব্দ শুনো, যিটো শব্দ আমি শুনো বা আমি যিখিনি আমি চকুৰে আমি দেখা পাওঁ, আমাৰ দৃষ্টিশক্তিয়ে যিমানখিনি আমি বৰ্ণ প্ৰত্যক্ষ কৰিব পাৰিছো, সেয়াই বৰ্ণৰ সমস্ত তাৰ অঞ্চল বা ভূমি বা ৰেঞ্জেছ এডজাষ্ট কৰা নাই। ঠিক যেনেকে আমি যিটো আমাৰ কাণেৰে যিটো শুনিছো, হিউমেন হিয়াৰিংটোৱেই লাষ্ট ৰেঞ্জ নহয় বা অনলি ৰেঞ্জ নহয়। ঠিক সেই ধৰণে মেণ্টেল ৰেঞ্জটো অনলি ৰেঞ্জ নহয়, বাট মেণ্টেল কনচিয়াছনেছ ইজ ডেফিনেটলি এ কনচিয়াছনেছ। আমি সেই বিষয়েও আমি উইল টেক আপ that mind is surely a consciousness. কিন্তু গতিকে আমি সেইটো আলোচনা কৰিলো, আৰু তাৰ পিছত বাকি কনচিয়াছনেছৰ আৰু 2-3টা এসপেক্ট আমি আলোচনা কৰিম আমি আমাৰ পৰৱৰ্তী ক্ষেত্ৰত আলোচনা কৰিম। And till then, let me allow to conclude here, and if you want to interact anything, we can interact for few minutes. Thank you and namaskar to all. কোনোবাই কিবা সুধিব? এইবোৰ আমি মাজে মাজে কিছুমান এছপেক্ট উইল বি ৰিপিটেড along with other যেতিয়া আমি other কনচিয়াছনেছৰ কথা আলোচনা কৰিম, কিছুমান কথা ৰিপিট হৈ গৈ থাকিব আৰু তাৰপিছত আপোনাৰ কনচিয়াছনেছত, মোৰ কনচিয়াছনেছত এটা অন্তত এটা আইডিয়া এটা যিটো জমা হ'ব, সিমানেই যথেষ্ট আমাৰ। অন্তত কনচিয়াছনেছ is the only substance, fundamental thing, a reality inherent in existence, a dynamic energy, creative energy. Consciousness is motion, consciousness is everything. Without consciousness, man does not exist.
Diganta da?
Hi.
আচ্ছা, consciousness is a type of awareness then?
Yes.
আচ্ছা, তেনেহলে ধৰক এজন মানুহে কোমাত আছে বা এনেকুৱা, তেতিয়াও কি তাৰ কনচিয়াছনেছ আছে?
সেইটোৱেতো আমি ইয়াতে আলোচনা কৰিলো, এই যিটো আমি এইটো যে কলো যে কনচিয়াছনেছ এ ৰিয়েলিটি ইনহাৰেণ্ট ইন এক্সিষ্টেন্স, কি কলো? ইট ইজ দিয়াৰ ইভেন ৱেন ইট চিমছ টু আছ টু বি কোৱাইট এবচেণ্ট।
আচ্ছা, এই কন্ডিশনটো তাৰ মানে এবসেন্ট অৱস্থাত আছে।
কৈছে যে উইদাউট কনচিয়াছনেছ থাকিবই নোৱাৰে। কৈছে যে এটা শিলৰ, এটা যিটো শিলক, নহলে ভাৰতবৰ্ষত আমি শিলক কিয় পূজা কৰো? বিকজ কনচিয়াছনেছ ইজ ইনভলভ, চিক্ৰেটলি ইনভলভ। Because the whole universe is manifestation of consciousness.
আর এই যে আমি যে ম্যাটার আৰু এনার্জির যে রিলেশন জানো দাদা, ই ইজ ইকুয়াল টু mc স্কয়ার, ইটোৰ লগত ইটো যেন মিল পাই আছো মই।
Yes, definitely. কাৰণ এতিয়া বিজ্ঞানে কৈছে, যিটো কৈছিলে যে বস্তুৰ কোনো প্ৰথমতে বিজ্ঞানে কৈছিলে মেটাৰ ইজ আল্টিমেট, কৈছে এতিয়া কৈছে মেটাৰ ইজ নট আল্টিমেট, শক্তি ইজ আল্টিমেট বুলি কৈছে। দেন হোৱাট ইজ শক্তি? শক্তি জানো চুব পাৰি? শক্তি জানো মানুহে চকুৰে দেখা পায়? বাট হোৱাট ইজ দেন শক্তি? যিটো আমাৰ স্পিৰিচুৱেলিটিয়ে কৈ থৈছে, হোৱাট ইজ এনাৰ্জি? এনাৰ্জি ইজ নাথিং বাট কনচিয়াছনেছ ইন একশ্যন। তেওঁলোকে ইমান এটা, এটলিষ্ট তেওঁলোকেও সাবজেক্টিভ ট্ৰুথ, that energy is a subjective truth. Energy cannot be visualized. Energy cannot be touched. Matter is ultimate বুলি নকয়, rather মেটাৰৰ কোনো, গতিকে একফালৰ পৰা ক'বলৈ গ'লে শংকৰাচাৰ্যই যিটো কথা কৈছিল যে ব্ৰহ্মসত্য জগত মিথ্যা, সেয়াও মিছা কথা নহয়। Scientifically it is proved, because everything is consciousness, a subjective element, a subjective substance. And তেওঁলোকে অলৰেডি কৈছে যে মেটাৰ ইজ নাথিং বাট এনাৰ্জি বুলি অলৰেডি লাষ্ট সাইন্টিফিক ট্ৰুথে কিমানলৈ গৈছে। যদি সায়েন্সৰ এৰোগেন্স নাথাকিলেহেঁতেন, যদি ডগমেটিক নহ'লহেঁতেন, সায়েন্সৰ এপ্ৰোচ যদি কনজাৰভেটিভ নহ'লহেঁতেন, সায়েন্সৰ মাইণ্ডছেট যদি নেৰো নহ'লহেঁতেন, সায়েন্স, মডাৰ্ণ সায়েন্স could have discovered many more things. মানে নলেজৰ ক্ষেত্ৰত এই সায়েন্স এণ্ড স্পিৰিচুৱেলিটি ইতিমধ্যে মাৰ্জড হৈ গ'লহেঁতেন, কিন্তু বিকজ অফ ডগমেটিজিম, বিকজ অফ সায়েন্সৰ কনজাৰভেটিজিম, বিকজ অফ নেৰো ফিলচফি, বিকজ সায়েন্স ইজ নট কনচাৰ্ন এবাউট দি হোৱাই অফ দি এক্সিষ্টেন্স। Science is only observing the material process of the world. আমি সেই বিষয়েও আলোচনা কৰিম পিছত। সায়েন্সৰ ক্ষেত্ৰত শ্ৰী সদানন্দই যিবোৰ বেছিক লিমিটেশ্যনৰ কথা কৈ গৈছে সায়েন্সৰ, কিন্তু লগতে বিজ্ঞানে কি কয়, মহাৰিষেদৰ লাইফ ডিভাইনত এটা সুন্দৰ কথাও কৈ গৈছে যে এ ডে উইল কাম when science and spirituality will merge. কৈছে এতিয়া দুটা সত্তাই ইন্টিগ্ৰেলি যদি অন্বেষণ কৰিব পাৰিলেহেঁতেন, এইটো খুব ভাল কথা আছিল। কিন্তু যিহেতু দুইটাই ইন্টিগ্ৰেলি একেলগে জইণ্টলি ইনভেষ্টিগেট, অনুসন্ধান কৰিব পৰা নাই, দুটাই বেলেগে বেলেগে কৰি আছে, আৰু দুটাই বেলেগে বেলেগে কৰি থাকিলেও ওৱান ডে দে উইল মিট দেমছেলফ।
আসলে দাদা ইন্ডিয়াৰ স্পিৰিচুৱেল ইটো ইমান বেছি আগুৱাই গৈছে, সায়েন্স তাক চুব পৰা নাই যেন লাগে।
নাই পৰা সায়েন্স এতিয়াও যদি আমি প্ৰপাৰলি আলোচনা কৰো, ইণ্ডিয়াৰ স্পিৰিচুৱেলিটি ইজ much more etu bahut
more
uparat
advanced, বহুত advanced.
সেইকাৰণে কালি আমাৰ এতিয়া বহুত আপুনি মাৰ্কেটত চাব এই ধৰক লাষ্ট 10 ইয়াৰ্ছত ইণ্ডিয়ান নলেজ চিষ্টেম বুলি বহুত কিতাপ আহিছে কিন্তু ইণ্ডিয়ান নলেজ চিষ্টেম মানে কি ইণ্ডিয়া মানে কি ভাৰত মানে কি ইভিন এপিটোমোলজিক্যালি ভাৰত শব্দটোৰ অৰ্থ হ'ল ভা মানে জ্ঞান ভাৰত শব্দটো যে আহিছে ভা মানে জ্ঞান আৰু ৰত মানে হ'ল তাত একেবাৰে নিবৃত তাতে প্ৰবৃত্ত হৈ থকা জ্ঞানত প্ৰবৃত্ত হৈ থকা গতিকে ভাৰতৰ কামেই জ্ঞানৰ এক্সপ্লোৰেশ্যন অফ নলেজ এণ্ড নলেজ এণ্ড নলেজ অনলি আৰু কোনোবাই কিবা সুধিব
স্যাৰ মোৰ এটা এই অৰ্গানাইজাৰৰ ওচৰত এটা বিনম্ৰ অনুৰোধ আছে
হয়
যে আপোনালোকে কাইণ্ডলি এনেকে চলাব যাতে আমি এটা ৱাৰ্ডো মিছ নকৰো
হয় হয়
কোনো মানে ডিষ্টাৰবেন্সটো একদম সহ্য কৰিব পৰা নাই চ'
হয়
কাইণ্ডলি আপোনালোকে চাব যাতে মিউট কৰি দিব পাৰে
হয় হয় হয়
ইট ইজ
চাব
মোৰ
লাগিব
একদম মানে আৰ্নেষ্ট ৰিকুৱেষ্ট টু অল দ্য অৰ্গানাইজাৰ্ছ
So, Jyoti Das, we may conclude perhaps.
Yes, sir. Yes, Sushmita ma'am, yes, definitely. I'll kind of, update your request, and I'm sure like all the esteemed participants would feel the same because as we see, today is the 17th session, and as we see, the sessions are getting more and more interesting day by day. As human beings, we call ourselves the most advanced species. We take a lot of pride in calling ourselves the most advanced species in the planet. And yet, I think we have a lot to work on the basic aspects of humanity, which I think, as Sir has pointed out through his lectures, has a lot to do with understanding and development of consciousness. And also the way Sir has brought in the whole idea about man and animal, the idea about and again now after the Q&A session also the whole relevance of Indian knowledge systems in understanding all of this. I think yes, so your request is only legitimate, ma'am. Thank you everyone, thank you so much, thank you sir, thank you, big thank you to this team participants for joining us again tonight, and also our technical team which I think works relentlessly to make this possible every single time through a virtual platform. Thank you so much, good night.
Thank you, and namaskar and good night to all.
Thank you, and namaskar.